Hello and welcome to the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michaela, and today I have the pleasure to have Tracy Lee here with me. Tracy is the CEO and co-founder of This.Labs. She's also a speaker, conference organizer, and the blogger. If you look at her profile, you really have to wonder how she manages all. So today I want to get a good understanding of her work running a dev shop and also her work helping conferences shine. And so I'm super thrilled to have her here with me today. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So Tracy, I often start really at the beginning with my guests here. So how did you come into tech? What was your journey? Do you have like a tech background, or did you come cross industries, or how did that really start for you?
So I grew up in the Silicon Valley, and in the Silicon Valley, like, you're surrounded by startups and conferences and tech. You just can't hide from it. So it was really easy for me to get into tech, and I started a startup because that's what you do in the Silicon Valley. It's very true. And it was tons of fun. I was more on the business side. I wasn't really into development. But then after my last startup, I did it for about 8 years, then it got acquired. I decided that development seems interesting. And I'm so happy that I started doing it like right before ES 2015 was officially released. So really like kind of on the brink of what we know as JavaScript today, but a lot of really great features, and development generally is just a lot easier. So I learned to code and totally, again, just fell in love with it. Love building community, just saw JavaScript as like a very warm and welcoming place to where I wanted to hang out and participate. So did that and have been doing that ever since.
Yeah, this is also one of the things that somehow struck me when I looked at your profile. It's like, oh, she started her own company that early. Like for me, it really took a lot of time and a lot of courage to start a company. I always felt during university, I felt like I'm too young, too unexperienced, and so on. So how was that for you? Why did you have the confidence to start your own company?
I'm not totally sure, but I remember when I was 18, I was looking at all this jewelry, and I was like, oh, all this jewelry is so pretty, but it's so expensive. Well, I could make it. So I spent this weekend, I bought all this jewelry, and I just spent a weekend making jewelry. And by the end of the weekend, my entire bed was like full of jewelry that I had made. So I was like, well, I should start a jewelry business. So I think generally, like, I've always been wanting to start things. Like, I love to start things. So I've started a lot of companies. Some of them have been successful, some of them haven't. But I think it's kind of like when you look in development and people are like, oh, Redux. Well, that's an easy thing to build. I'm going to build my own. Or React. That's easy. I'm going to build my own framework, right? So that's kind of how I approached building, and just kind of went from there. But yeah, I've never really been afraid to like start things. In college, I started 3 companies. I was just on fire, excited about everything, and things go well, things don't, whatever. And then you move on, and at some point in time, you'll be successful, and then life is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mindset is completely different, because when I see React or Redux, I'm like, this is so complicated. I would never do it. I'm so happy somebody else made it, right? But also, for example, for companies, I think I also created a lot of things, but it always like the step being an official company seemed like, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit easier to start a company in the US. Maybe it's the same. I don't know. But I felt like, oh God, the legal things, and then you have to pay your insurance, and like just also
it's way easier to start a company in the US. Oh,
maybe,
no.
yeah.
Yeah, because because in the US, I remember starting my first company, all you have to do is register a business. It costs under $50, maybe $30, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to, there's different types of businesses,
Yeah.
right? So as a small business owner, you just pay $30-something, you register your name, that costs somewhere between $20 to $50, and then you're done. That's it.
How did you come about founding This.Labs? and what is your company about? And you're a co-founder,
Yeah.
so there's also another person, at least one person that founded that. So who is that, and how did you decide to do that together?
Yeah, I mean, I really love the JavaScript community, and at the time, I really believed in bringing people together. So, kind of evangelizing JavaScript. And this was during the time of framework wars. So, it was all about showing the community that, like, hey, we're all one community under JavaScript. So, don't be fighting on Twitter. Let's spread the word. Let's like talk about new features. Let's get excited instead. So, really kind of promoting that type of like, I don't know, more community versus like fighting generally. I'm not saying everybody was fighting, but there was much more like divisiveness, I feel like, back then. Now there's divisiveness in other ways. So I was a little bit burnt out after my last startup, took a break. And then during that break, that's when I learned how to code. I was surrounded by amazing people. And it was myself, this other guy, Taras, and then Ben Lush. And I was like, well, we should like start a company together. So we started it together, and that was back in, gosh, I think it was November 2016. And ever since then, just kind of been going at it. And some people have moved on to different things, but I really love what we're building. I think as a consultancy, so we're a team of about 50 developers now. And I really love every single one of the people I work with. And consulting is interesting because you get to help solve, hard problems with companies, but also at the same time, it also is just consulting in a sense, right? So I think the difference about our team and kind of our beliefs and our goals as a company is to provide excellent services and be able to contribute some of those funds back to the community. So we have this apprentice program to try to get underserved folks into tech. So giving them their first shot and giving them opportunities here. And that's been really amazing. So as we grow, we get to hire more apprentices, which I think is amazing.
Ah, that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I actually had like the pleasure to work with you just a little bit at one company. We crossed our path, and I was really impressed how professionally you did everything. And I also thought to myself, like, it's really difficult to work with startups at one point, right? Because it could be that they don't know exactly the direction that they want to go in, or maybe they're completely changing, pivoting. Maybe they don't have the funding. You don't know, right? So there can be a lot of different challenges. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, startups definitely have to be at a certain stage for us, right? We definitely have a minimum in terms of what we can do. But if startups have ideas, then we can really help them flesh it out. I think especially if you're a startup that does not have any technical background, I come from a non-technical background. And so, my gosh, I remember first learning how to code and I was like, oh my gosh, I was running my business wrong. I was treating my developers the wrong way, right? Like there's all these things about how developers can be most successful in their work, and it's not filling them with meetings. So like that's one big thing. And talking about let's build it now versus okay, we can build it now, but there's technical debt. So you don't really like understand as a business person what technical debt is until you like actually learn how to code, I feel like. Because I feel like if I did, I would have made very different choices because you pay for it later, right? Yeah. So I love helping startups just like understand how to be successful, and we help them on a technical level, maybe helping them build out their MVP, and then we love to help them build their teams. So as they're hiring full-time people, we like to help make sure that we turn it over in a really good way. I think a lot of consultancies are like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose business. Don't tell them because then they won't need us and we're going to lose the client. But for us, we really just believe in making the world a better place, making the development world a better place. So we love helping our startups grow in that sense.
Okay, so you're coming in and you help them and then somehow you're also leaving again, or how does that work?
I mean, we help them on an ongoing basis, right? Like we can help them for years and years to come. And we've worked with some of our startup clients for many, many, many years, especially on an architectural perspective, right? Like a lot of startups just need very high level technical expertise so that things don't get messed up. But we also believe in companies building their own teams as well. So for teams that like to do that and want to do that, right? Like we serve as a really good, like kind of jumping board. I think also with startups, like technical people kind of get nervous joining a startup with nothing built. So it's a lot easier to recruit as a startup, I feel like, if you have a foundation of, okay, here's some things, architecture set up. It's much easier to recruit talent that way.
And so what about software engineering practices? Do you come with your own set of practices where you say, well, we are definitely going to write some tests. We are definitely doing code reviews, or is that really flexible, whatever the clients want?
It's flexible. I mean, we definitely, have recommendations. Like having no tests is never a great thing. At least having happy path tests is really important, right? That's something that we believe. Code reviews obviously are really important for us as well. We never want somebody to be reviewing their own code and submitting. Yeah, so I mean, we definitely come with that. We also developed this framework called the PAM Stack. So if you go to thepamstack.com, PAM Stack is process abstractions and mentorship. Kind of like our belief in how to build good development teams. And we try to take those best practices in with the teams that we work with to try to help them be like more successful, right? Like I think building an engineering team is also not just about writing good code, it's also about developing good culture, good ways to communicate, making sure people aren't fighting for whatever reason, making sure there's clear expectations, and then also making sure the tech is actually attainable enough for junior developers or mid-level developers to actually be able to contribute. So making the right technical decisions so that it's not just like, oh man, we need like the most expert person on this and we'll never be able to hire anybody because there's only one person that understands the code.
Yeah. Can you bring me back a little bit to the beginnings? Because I think a lot of software engineers thinking about starting a dev shop, and maybe they are just their own dev shop, right? So they are freelancers or consultants helping people write. I'm also sometimes helping startups with their MVPs and so on. But I never thought about I've definitely thought about it, but I never made it a reality to hire others, right? To now it's not you or you and your 3 friends, it's 50 people. So how did that come? Is that something that you started out with this idea of we want to be really a big development shop, or was it something that the demand was there and you had to hire more people? What's the vision behind it?
Well, I actually wanted to start a company because I really just love building brands and I really wanted to just keep giving back to the JavaScript community. And one of my friends, he wanted me to help him build his consultancy and do the branding for it. And I was like, this is exhausting. Like, why don't we just start a company together and we just like have one brand so I could just focus on one brand. So that was the initial thing. And then in terms of consulting, like we just did it so that we could pay the bills, of course, right? But mainly I wanted to pay the bills so I could like do my DevRel fun stuff in the community. But then we started growing, right? Like we started getting people looking for work. And again, I think based on my network and the people I was starting the company with and kind of the things I was doing, it was really easy for me to work with top talent. So we've had some like amazing developers on our team and partners on our team. And, that's really kind of helped us. I think that's probably one thing that's unique about us. Like, it's so hard to hire these days, I feel like, but I feel like we're doing a really good job at it. And thankfully, again, we've built enough of a brand that it's possible. I think generally with hiring people, like, again, for me, it's just always been really natural. Like I remember my first successful startup, Dish Crawl, right? It was like, okay, it's just me. Okay, this person in Montreal wants to do food crawls. Okay, let's talk. Okay, let me teach her how to do it. Okay, cool. I replicated myself. All right, so now we're in 2 cities. Okay, now we're in 5 cities. Now we're in 15. Oh my gosh, there's too many people. I need somebody to help me with operations. Oh, look, I found somebody for operations. Let's do that. And it was definitely scary from a financial standpoint because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to pay these people now. How am I going to do that? So a lot of times we started off just by like hiring contractors, right? Because it's less of a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have to find people that can be that flexible with you because it's like part-time contract work. And then, I mean, thankfully for my last company, I had an investor and he just said, I was like, oh my God, we have $10,000 in the bank. Can I hire more people? Because we needed to hire more people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, look, keep building. And if you get to a point where you need the money, I'll cover payroll. So that gave me the confidence to just have at it. Thankfully, I never had to ask him for money because it just kind of kept covering itself. But it was dicey. It was scary at the time. So I think for consultancies, like you definitely have to save up enough money.
Mm-hmm.
Some people operate in a very like more laissez-faire way where it's like, all right, I got $10,000 in the bank. Cool, I'm going to hire somebody. And what if I can't pay them at the end of the month? Like, it's going to be okay. I'll tell them I'll pay them at, the next month. And that's really stressful for me. So the way I've, built this dot is just by making sure we keep building kind of like sustainably. Because I mean, again, some startup founders will show up 50-person company and just be like, oh my gosh, we ran out of money. We can't pay you. This is your last day. Goodbye. And I never wanted to be in that situation. So I've always built companies very conservatively from a financial perspective because it's very stressful, very stressful.
Yeah, I cannot even imagine. First of all, it's horrible, I think, because the person worked for you, right? So why, like, this would, I don't know. Like, it didn't even cross my mind that that's a possibility, right? That you say, okay, maybe I can't pay that person and well, that's it, right? Which is really, I think, also from just a human perspective, really cruel, right? But yeah, you're right. And yeah, but still it's very different. Like for me, I'm always like thinking, how can I do work that I don't require anybody else? That I don't have to hire anybody, because I feel like this independence without hiring people is also really, really nice. But it's probably a very, very different way of working, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's like the grass is always greener. I feel like you have to find
side, right? Yeah.
what works for you. Like if you like that as a consultant, then amazing. Like it's also hard to work with people, right? Like one of my friends, it's like a 2-person, well, it's more than 2 people, but like 2 people on the technical side.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired another person, and the developer they hired is just like not showing up to work all the time.
Wow.
And I don't think they know how to deal with that. They're trying, but they're still not being very effective in terms of getting that person to actually be able to like show up to work. And they're still paying them. And I'm like, man, I would have fired this person so long ago, or like set expectations better. So I think you learn along the way. I think right now I love my team. I think everything's going very well, but there's definitely been situations where team members have been unhappy and or like misbehaving from an employee perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate those times because they teach you so much. Like rules don't become rules until you have an issue, right? But then that process that is developed through people like just saying, oh, there was no rule, so I didn't have to follow anything, that makes a company like more stable. So I admire the freedom that you have to be able to do whatever you want. I miss that a lot from like when it was just me doing what I was doing. And I mean, your life changes too. Like as a developer, if you want to start a consultancy, you better be prepared like not to do much development at some point in time, depending on how big you get. Like for me, I don't get to do as much development. I used to spend all of my time or 20 hours a week being able to do that. Yeah. And I've gotten over it, but it took me like a year to finally come to terms with it.
Yeah. And so you were talking about building a brand. So how does that work? How do you build a brand? What can you tell us developers on how can we build a brand, right? Like
Yeah,
what's a good strategy? Hire somebody, or is there a way that we can turn our own, little
yeah.
dev shop into a brand, or even the startup, right? If you want to do a startup, you also have to have a brand. How do you develop that?
Honestly, I feel like I've been doing it for so long, I just kind of go on autopilot. I've never really thought about it, but I think generally, like for me, it's all about building genuine connections. So I was, again, surrounded by a lot of amazing people doing these amazing events, bringing good content. You kind of build credibility from that perspective, right? And then started building a brand that way and just promoting it on Twitter, right? Twitter is an amazing platform to help you build your personal brand. I don't think building a company brand is really that different from just building your personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
And you can look at all the Instagram influencers in terms of how to do that. But it's really just having conversations. And it takes a lot of time, right? Like you have to be there, you're networking, you're talking to people. It's a lot of work in the beginning. So it has to be something like you're excited about, or maybe not. Like you don't, I mean, I think you have to choose what you are excited about. And if you're not excited about something, then don't do it. So if you're like
Mm-hmm.
not excited about building a brand, fine. No big deal, right? There's a lot of 2, 3 person consultancies out there that don't really have a big brand or whatever, but they're successful in their own right. So, and there's a lot of people who have built really big brands and kind of suck. But they're good at building brands, right? So just because you have a good brand also doesn't mean you have like a good company. So you kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, I also think like there's like I'm a lot in the indie hacker community and follow a lot of
Mm-hmm.
bootstrap businesses and so on. And there are often also technical people like me that marketing doesn't come that easy, and building a brand, all of that is a little bit foreign. And then there are a lot of discussions. I wouldn't call them wars because it's just different mindsets, but I think also different skills and passion about either you build it and they will come mindset, and they always say like never works, and then promote a lot and then build it. And recently I talked to a couple of really cool developer tooling companies as well. They were talking about the growth mindset and the product mindset, right? And the product mindset was it's again the strategy of build it and they will come, right? So really make a really cool product and then you will have success with it, versus the people that are building landing pages for some idea that they're having and there is not even one line of code written. What do you think about that? Like, is there a camp that you're in where you think like the landing page people that are just looking for, is there even an interest for us to build that thing? Is this the path that you would go? Or would you say, well, it's better to really build a really cool thing and then they will come, people will come and celebrate that?
I think it depends on your strengths. So one of my friends, he just raised, I don't know how many $1 million on a $30 million valuation with no product. And that's a very big valuation for no product, right? So if you're good at that, amazing. Because if you can market something, even if the idea is not so great, you still have a competitive advantage if you listen to your customers, because they'll tell you what they want and then that brand will evolve, or that product hopefully will evolve, right? You can also know exactly what you want to build and build an amazing product and nobody will come. So I think having a landing page, and I mean, I think the landing page generally is customer validation, right? Like that's what people are looking for. So a lot of
Exactly,
people,
yeah.
they raise on customer validation. And if you have good customer validation, then amazing. I feel like it's also cheaper that way, right? Like who's going to invest? It's like you're investing like months or years or whatever amount of time building something, not even knowing if it's going to be successful. So, like, I mean, I'm building a product right now and it's for conferences, and I did some customer validation, so I know people want it. I talked to a bunch of conference organizers, but I also kind of know what we want, and I'm the customer myself, right? So I know I'm going to want this. So we've been building it for months now, and it'll happen. There's no landing page. So it just really depends on, again, where your strengths are. But customer validation is very important.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, but it's also a tricky thing, right? Because it seems so easy to have a landing page and then you can validate. But if you don't have a following, for example, what is the landing page really telling you, right? Like there are 100 people that you manage to get from Facebook and Twitter on your landing page, and then
you talk to them. Yeah. Even if it's like 2 people, even if it's 5 people, right? Like you're at least talking to people. So a great example is like, if you're building a product for moms, maybe you're building a babysitting app.
Yeah.
Well, you can build a landing page and say like, find a babysitter in less than 10 seconds or whatever it is. And then you can actually join all the Facebook mom groups that are available and just ask them like, hey, I'm testing this out. If you're interested, go here. So I think as an entrepreneur, you have to understand how to get a customer. So maybe building a landing page and just trying to figure out how the heck to get a customer is important. If you can't get one person to look at your landing page, then you probably need to find like a partner or hire somebody to help you. But if you can do it yourself, great. And again, like setting up a landing page doesn't take any time. You can set up a Squarespace in like, half an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that the distribution and where do you find your customers, I think this is such an important topic that it's really, people don't talk about it that much. I'm thinking more about that now, right? So how do you find actually the people that you think are interested in your product? And the landing page, I think is a good way as you describe it, to do that and test that out. Yeah,
landing page with a sign up email, because again, you're getting people to come to your website, right? And they've shown some level of interest. So just talking to them. I mean, I think it's so much easier, like especially as a developer. I feel like developers, not all developers, but in general, developers tend to be a little bit more introverted. So I love the internet because, like, for example, it's really funny. I just moved and I haven't talked to any of my neighbors, and I'm not really that excited or interested in like saying like, oh, you're in your garage, I'm going to come say hi. My husband has met them, but I haven't.
Yeah.
But I found like the Facebook group of my neighborhood, and I feel totally comfortable online. So I'm like, hey, how's it going? This is who I am. So nice to meet you all. And then I'm meeting a ton of people there, and they're like, oh, we're going to do this like happy hour thing. We take walks sometimes. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I feel totally comfortable now. This is great. And now I will go meet people, right? So I think as a developer doing customer validation, it's so easy to just like go on Reddit, go on Facebook, go on Twitter, randomly talk to people, like search for the people who would use your product. And it's much less stressful than like having to go up to somebody and actually talk to them.
Yeah. I think, it probably depends. Like, for example, like I'm running this workshop business, and I was really looking forward to going to conferences and having face-to-face conversations with people. Right. I'm really missing that now in the pandemic, because I totally don't feel comfortable to send anybody any emails. But if I would be at the conference and just we had like a chat, we probably would naturally talk about things. And I'm really missing that. So yeah, I don't know. Like I feel sometimes online I'm a little bit more hesitant to connect with people online than in real life. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because like your approach versus my approach, right? Like for me, I was like, well, let's just start a company. It'll be fine. You know?
Exactly.
I mean, what's the worst that could happen? And I think you were a little bit more careful in that approach. But like the reason why, for example, I was like, oh, that looks easy. Let me do that, right? It's because I was naive, and that got me that let me do things that maybe, what people normally wouldn't do. But I think it's the same thing, right? Like you just go in there, who cares? You kind of have to have that approach of just like, whatever. I mean, I really admire salespeople for this reason, because salespeople, they get told no all the time. So like whenever I meet and like PR people too. Oh my gosh. PR people and salespeople, like they get told no. Everybody is mean to them. And they're still like happy all the time because they have to be, right? And so like, you kind of have to just be like, it's going to be fine. Who cares? They're going to reject me. That's okay. Because more often than not, you will get success, right? It's like, if you don't try, then you're not gonna get where you want to be.
Yeah, so, true.
Have at it. Who cares? It'll be fine.
But if I send an email and then somebody writes me back and then I send back and then they ghost me, I'm like, what happened? Like, what happened? And that doesn't work or doesn't happen so much in real life, right? So it's not like you go over somewhere and somebody turns around and doesn't talk to you anymore, right? So
right.
Yeah, but true. Yeah, so cool. So you're doing this amazing thing with your company and you're now building a startup and you opened so many different startups and do you have ideas for more? Are you going to do more startups, or is this dot really what you're mainly focusing on?
This dot is definitely what I'm mainly focused on. I mean, we're building a product internally, right? So it's like something our team can get excited about. And it took me, I haven't built a product, like had an idea for a product for a very long time. So it's been since it's been a long time, right? Like I've been doing this stuff for I think it took me like 3 or 4 years to finally be like, okay, this sounds like a great idea. So yeah, I mean, we're excited about it and I'm excited to go to market with it and it should be fun. But yeah, I mean, it's for conferences and just like people being able to connect with each other. And I'm hoping it gets launched at some point in time, but we've been so busy here too. So
yeah. Oh, very exciting.
Hard to balance. Yeah.
Oh, I have 1,000 ideas. I'm just waiting for summer to be over because now I'm just enjoying myself.
Yeah,
but when
great.
winter starts, I'm going to do something again. Yeah, more building of products, some cool ideas. Yeah.
That's cool. So interesting. That's such a different mindset, I feel like, than I don't know, maybe it's like that for people who have like more contrast in terms of weather. But I mean, I don't ever feel like, oh, winter's here, summer's here, I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm just like, yeah, another day.
Yeah, but it definitely the weather, because I was like, our good weather took until June, right? Like I always felt like, winter is coming. And I felt like this, especially with Corona, right? And then we are all inside and locked up and it's horrible. And so now this summer, since we have nice weather and it's only like, 20 days that we have nice weather, or 10 days. And now I'm really like, I have to enjoy it. I can't wait too much. Like I really have to enjoy it, every minute of it, because it's not lasting very long and then I can work again.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. I love that.
Yeah. Okay, Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you. Is there something that you want to, tell my listeners, maybe especially people that may be thinking about opening a dev shop or starting their own business, having their startup idea or wanting to do something? How should they dare to do it? What are some of the advice that you can give to people?
I think just do it. Like, I remember when I learned how to do a little bit of code. So I learned Photoshop and I was like, I can design websites. And seriously, I was like, what? I'm going to build websites. And I went to a cafe every day at lunch, working at my full-time job. I walked up to him. I was like, what? You need a website. And he's like, well, how much is it going to cost? I'm like, it'll cost $300. And I built it and it took me forever. But like, I was so proud. And then all my favorite restaurants I would go to, I'm like, you need a website. So I did a website for a froyo place, for a Peruvian place. And I charged like whatever, $300 to $500, or worked for food. But they didn't say no. So I think that, again, is like a thing, right? You just kind of have to like go out and do it and see what happens. And if they say no, no big deal, whatever. If it doesn't work out, so what? You move on to the next thing, but at least it's like practice, right?
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining, and bye.
Bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Bye.